Hello, my name is Gisele Schoniger, and I have expressed an interest to my mom to get her life story. My mom's name is Elisabeth Schoniger. She was born in Yugoslavia, and what was at one time Austro-Hungary became Yugoslavia and is now Serbia, but with German heritage. And a story that I think needs to be told. My mom is 78 years old, and I think this is for all the times that she told the story and I didn't listen. And she's really our family historian, and I feel like it would be a privilege to have just a small slice of her life. I know we can't encapsulate 78 years of an extraordinary woman's life, but I wanted to just get a little piece of it. So this is my mother, Elisabeth Schoniger, and I wanted to just start, if you could just share where you were born and a little bit about your family and just what you want to share so that your grandkids can hear this.
Well, just like Giselle said, I was born in Yugoslavia. It was also at one time Hungary, and it became Yugoslavia again during World War II. I was born in 1932 and went to school in a total German village. Our next village was Serbian, Yugoslav, Hungarians, different peoples were living side by side. And then as World War II broke out, it just really became very bad for us, for everybody, but mostly for us Germans, because as the war was coming to an end, our stay in Yugoslavia, or Hungary at the moment, and then it became Yugoslavia, it became really bad. So my relatives were taken to Russia, to labor camps, and we, the old people, my mother and the children, were put into concentration camps. But I think maybe before, let's say when I was born, let's go back to when I was a child. I have two brothers, they still live. They're 2 and 4 years younger, and my sister is 12 years younger than I am, and she and one brother are living in Germany. We also came to Germany after World War II. I practically then grew up there and worked there until I was 21 years old, and then one brother and I, we came to America. We decided we go to America. It was not very good in Germany at the time because there were too many people, refugees. We lived in camps for almost 6 years in a refugee camp. It was not a concentration camp, but a refugee camp. And so we decided to go to America, and we did. We came in 1956, and I met my husband a year later, who was also from Germany. Was also from refugee. He was from Romania, no,
Czechoslovakia. It's okay. You're fine.
From Czechoslovakia. Yeah, and his family lived in the same city where we lived in Germany. And so then he and I and my brother, we came to America. Well, we started our family here. We had our oldest son, Rick, and then Giselle and Michael. And I have 3 wonderful children. I now have 4 grandchildren. And They are
Which
all
she
wonderful,
adores.
thank God, yes. There is Stephanie and Stephen and Honey and Sarah, and they are beautiful children and are very good children. So my grandchildren are I'm very blessed. My husband passed away 20 years ago.
At the age of 59.
At the age of 59, yeah, he had a heart problem which nobody knew, or at least we didn't pay any attention to it, because his father was 58 when he passed away with the same
Arteriosclerosis.
and his grandfather, and so it must have been in the family.
So it's 4 generations. The men all died between
before
58 and 59.
the age of 60. Yeah, and we're living in California. We came here, so I'm here 54 years in California, and so I'm kind of getting old. I'm forgetful, and I notice it that I'm getting forgetful. It's kind of hard. It's just the last years to go on.
To kind of come to terms with that, and
and
to let it be okay.
Well, it has to be okay.
Right. So we're going to come back to moving to California, and to moving to this country, because I remember not too long ago you talked about how horrible the conditions were coming here. That at that time, and we can talk about it now and then go backwards if you want. But you said to me not too long ago that coming to this country was nothing like what the dream was that you thought it was going to be. We were very poor.
Yes,
you and Dad, we were very poor.
Yeah, we still had to pay our trip overseas, the ship, our voyage. We had to pay it here. I made $1 an hour. My husband made $3.50 an hour. He was a skilled labor worker, and so did my brother. But we couldn't find work for quite a while, so we just had to take whatever came along. And we didn't have it very easy. And
I remember growing up, I think when you're a child you don't know that you're really poor unless you are surrounded by other people that have much more than you do.
Yeah, no, most everybody had practically the same nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't easy coming to even to America. Yes, it took a long time to where things were better. But then we didn't have it so good in Germany either. We lived there for 11 years, and it was pretty rough. 6 years in a refugee camp. That wasn't easy. My 4 siblings, my grandparents, my 2 aunts. We all lived for years in one room. So it was not easy. And why did we come to Germany? Even my granddaughter, she asked me one time, Oma, why did you come to Germany? I said, well, where would you have gone as a German who was deprived of their homeland? We were deprived of our house, of our everything. I lost my mother at the age of 34. We need to go back there.
Yeah.
I lost my father. I was 15 and a half, which was 1.5 years later. And we were in a camp in Yugoslavia, so we fled across the border to Hungary. We lived there for a year, and then all the Germans were expelled from Hungary, so we had to flee again. So we went to Austria, and then from Austria we fled, and by foot and over the mountains, we fled to Germany. So that's why we came over there. And why did we come to America? Well, my brother and I thought maybe it would be better here. But at the end now, my brother and sister in Germany are just as well off as we are over here, and I have to say, thank God, we are fairly well off. So it was worth coming here, and it was for my other siblings also worth staying where they are now, because they have a good life there too. Yeah, and if I may go back to to my early life, when we were in the camp, 1 year later, my mother died. She was 34 years old. She died of hunger and typhoid or typhus. There are 2 different that they call, I'm not sure which one it was. after were there in the camp for a year, my sister, who was just a baby at the time, she survived. She is still,
She
like
was
I said,
born in the refugee camp, right?
no, she was born
okay.
in 1944, before the end of the war. But like I say, my mother died, and thank God my one grandmother was still alive, so she took us and kept us and took us across the border from Yugoslavia to Hungary, where we met our father. And then, let's see, my father died 1.5 years after our mother died.
And why was he there?
Austria.
Why was
Well, he was in the Hungarian military. As the war went towards Germany, as the Russians advanced, the Hungarian military went, of course, farther north from the south, where we lived, into Budapest, and then all the way to Austria. And so he and his military friends were captured in Austria, and then by the English military. So they turned him over to the Russians, since he was from that part that the Russians took over. So then when he was let go, he somehow found found out where we were, we found out where he was, and so on. But there was no mail, there was no newspaper, there was no radio, no nothing like that for us. And so somehow we found one another. And then, like I say, we were in Austria, where he passed away. And then after he was dead, my grandparents said, now we are going to Germany, which then 2 aunts, my grandparents, and us 4 children, we did go. But going from Austria to Germany wasn't that easy either, because first you had to go from the Russian zone out. It was just like a border, like people come across here, across the border now from Mexico to America. We were caught by the Russians military. They then finally let us go. Then we had to go the German border, which they also stopped us from going. We went up the mountains.
So you literally went up over the Alps.
We climbed up the mountains to come to go to Germany. And then when we finally got there, we had to go to a camp where refugees have to register. They assigned a room, they assigned a card where you could get food. And first you had to be deloused. Everybody had to go through a
DDT?
Delousing process, because everybody, I mean, we were not clean, that's for sure. There were no baths, there were no showers, anything of that sort when you flee. And so we were assigned one room. There were 8 of us, plus a mother and a daughter, so there were 10 of us in one room for a whole year. And then then only our family was there. There were 8 of us then. So finally, my 2 aunts got married, found boyfriends, got married, and then just our grandparents and us. But like I say, for over 5 years, we lived in a refugee camp in Germany. Then we did get an apartment.
In Regensburg? Was that in Regensburg?
In Bavaria, yes. And so just our grandparents and us 4 children. But it was so small, so I decided I was going to America, and one of my brothers said he's going too. So this is how we decided to go to America.
Can we go back to when your family was in the refugee camp in Yugoslavia, and you were taken in by a family on a farm?
Oh, when I was taken in by a Hungarian family, when my mother, now from the camp, we were in the concentration camp, and at night we fled out. That was when my mother was still alive. We went out of the camp at night and back home to our village. So the Hungarian
What's the name
family
of your village?
took me. It was called Krnjaja, under the Yugoslav system. It was Karenj by the Hungarian system, and it is now called Klajicevo.
Okay.
And it's close to the city of Zombor. the camp, we were in 2 camps. One was called, well,
It's okay.
one was called Gakovo. That is now erased. You don't find that anymore. All the towns, the houses were all erased afterwards. And the other one was called Krushevye, which is also close to the city of Zombor. That's where you would find, that's where the camps are, and that's where the mass graves are, where one of them, my mother is, and many other relatives are buried.
Can you, before we go back to, can you tell how your mother was buried? It's such a poignant story.
Yeah, I was not there since this Hungarian family took me in. My 2 brothers, one was 9, the other 11, and my grandmother. And so as my mother was really starving in the cow, what do you call it?
A barn?
Barn, in the barn, because, once you are in that stage of dying, you cannot, nobody can stand you in the room anymore. So when she died, they made out of some of her clothes, they made a sack. My grandmother put her in, and one of my brothers helped her. They sewed her together, and they put her on a push cart. And my grandmother and one brother, they pushed her down to the cemetery, where the place, not a cemetery really, but where the holes were dug for people to be dumped. And so that's how she went. But I didn't know. I didn't know it for weeks. My younger brother, he was the 9-year-old, he came out of the camp and told me a few weeks later.
He walked, you said, 10 or 15 miles?
Yeah, easily, that long. And he said that Mom died, and it was unreal. I say to myself, or try to tell myself, this is impossible. You must know that. You must feel that your mother had died. And this is weeks later, and you don't know about it. But that's how things develop.
So, can you explain how you left the how you were out of the camp, and how you got to this family? And what did you do there? You said that was the hardest work you had ever done.
No, that was later in Germany. That was not there. No. Well, this family, they had no children, and they knew us from before we were in the camp, So that's why they took me in.
Oh, I see.
But then going across the border from Yugoslavia to Hungary, you have to do it at night, just like everybody else. Just try to watch where the guards are. They wouldn't know. You would have to watch, and then you just go across the border, and then on the other side you find a place, hopefully, where you could get something to eat and maybe to stay overnight or not.
So you had to beg for food often?
Yes, absolutely. Many times my brothers and I and other kids went to neighboring villages to beg for food. 1 egg, 1 slice of bread, just anything, an apple, anything. Yes. Because the food was very, very, very meager, and we were full of lice. We were full of these. When you get sick, you scratch all over your body. It was just inhumane. But like I say, then we did escape, all of us, not all together. First I went, then 2 weeks later, my brother and my grandmother with my sister, and then the next month my other brother. So anyway, we were finally united with our father. He arranged it so that somebody would bring us over, what they would call now, what they call them now, over here when they come across the border. So anyway, that's how. And then, like I say,
Or-
then in Hungary, we found a place where we could live on a little farm, and we worked there and got enough food. But then in 1947, all the Germans were expelled from Hungary also, because it was part of the communist and the Russian desire to get all Germans, which was probably around 20 million, from Russia, from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, from Hungary, Yugoslavia, Hungary, and let's not forget Czechoslovakia and Romania. And Romania. I think that's about all the countries I can remember where Germans lived for hundreds of years, and they all had to be evacuated, because that's what the three Stalin
powers.
and come on, help me.
This is why we're doing this. So the American president at the time, and then England,
and the
right?
English Churchill. And sorry.
Roosevelt and Churchill.
Yeah, they decided it's not funny, but you have to laugh or you cry.
Yeah.
So they decided that yes, or they accepted the Stalin's demand that the Germans must leave, and so they had to leave. And how they left, that was up to the people themselves. They were driven out of their homes. They came to the door and with a rifle and said, "Out! You know, you have 5 minutes. Pack your stuff and go." You know, my mother had a baby to carry, and we were 3 children, so it wasn't that simple. And some people had the horse and wagon, some did not. So however you managed to get from place to place. So it was said that about 20 million Germans were deprived of their homes, of everything, of their livelihood, and just had to leave. And most, of course, came to Germany, but many from there, Austria. First, we had to go to Austria and then to Germany. But many people went then to America. They went to South America, Australia, South Africa, wherever they were accepted later, and many millions stayed in Germany, where they are now, first the parents, the grandparents, now the now their grandchildren are living. Mm-hmm. So it's just how things develop. And it's not a unique thing. Now other people, wherever there are wars, people lose their homes, they lose their everything. Mm-hmm. Whether it was the Jewish people before that, and other minority groups that were persecuted and deprived of their homes. It's just one continuous thing, and we were just one of the groups that had to pay a price for what World War II was, or what maybe the First World War was, because my grandparents would talk about that, because that wasn't simple either. They lived in Hungary, and then it became Yugoslavia after World War after World War I it became Yugoslavia, and then in 1941, it became Hungary again, the same country, same place, same village, became Hungary. Then it became Yugoslavia, and now it is called Serbia. So it's not easy to now even look back at some of the terrible things and some of the history that we have lived through. So,
and now other places. Well, okay, so I've like 3 different areas I want to go. Can you talk about the mill, the farm and the mill, and your grandfather a little bit, and how that got passed down? That we actually had a mill where the people would bring their grain and have it processed. And
well, that's what my father's family had. They had a mill, and my mother's family, they had a big farm. They had horses, cows, and just the whole farm life.
And they had a vineyard?
We had a vineyard, and just But that was then, and that's over. That was over when we had to leave. So those were things that happened, and it's just gone. That's out and over.
So the farms, the families, your family lived in the village proper. They lived in a small village, but the farms were out into the country.
The land was out. It wasn't farms like in America, but there's a farm out there, and most people in our area lived in a closed family. I mean, a closed village, and you had your land out there, and you had your barns, and everything was in the village. Okay, that's how our towns were. They were regular towns, and you had your horse and buggy, and you went out, or wagons, and you went out and did your farm work. So it wasn't farms as you understand it in America, at least not in where I came from. In some other places it was different, but where I came from, we lived in villages. We lived, one house was next to another house, and there were cities and towns and just a regular village or towns or cities.
Now, I often remember a story, and I want to say he was an uncle or a cousin who had two boys that they were trying to...
Oh, yeah, my father's brother, he was shot to death at the time when we were gathered to be taken to the camps. My uncle had his two sons. They were supposed to
send them to Russia, right?
No, to slave labor. They were teenagers. They were supposed to go and work. And well, what happened to these young boys and young men? They sent them to Russia. So they were hiding, and somebody told them that they're in this house. There are two teenage boys, and they need to come, and they need to, to work for this new state that happened now. And my uncle wouldn't tell them, so they locked him up, they beat him up, and so forth. But my two cousins, they did flee, and my uncle had to dig his own grave. They did not, it was kind of like a show trial. They did not shoot him then, but they did shoot him later at the moment when we were put into the camps and when we were gathered together. So this is not very good.
It's fine. You're doing great, Mom. You're doing great.
But those are things that, are too far out.
Right, to remember.
For me to explain them.
Yeah, I understand.
So anyway, there were many. My mother's two brothers were in Russia for 5 and 7 years. Both of their wives, and one was a 16-year. Now that is important. One was a 16-year-old girl, was from Romania. She was a German girl where the Germans lived for 800 years, and that is the truth. For 800 years they lived in Romania. And she was 16 years old and was taken to Russia. And one of my uncles met her there. They got married, so they have 6 children. After they were released, 5 or 6 years later, they were released to Germany. So they now have already grandchildren. And as a matter of fact, my uncles have died already. But yes, they were from my mother's side were 2 brothers and 2 sister-in-laws who were not as soldiers. They were not soldiers. They were civilians. They were in Russia. It was very, very hard. So,
tell me about Uncle Frank's sister.
My cousin Frank, who lives here in America. His parents fled. They had a girl. They had 2 girls. 2 girls. One was a baby at the time, and my 14-year-old my 14-year-old cousin, and Frank, who is my cousin. He was about 11. So they fled with a wagon when everybody else fled at the time. That was before the Russians came. The baby died within 7 days as they were in Hungary. Then they were directed to go through Austria to Germany and all the way to where is now Poland. She died there in 1944 on Christmas Day, which is December 25 or 24 or 25. She died so as a 14-year-old. And so, yeah, she was my cousin. And then later, my aunt and uncle and Frank came to America. So they have lived here now. Of course, he's the only one alive, and because there are over 50 years passed since then.
And he talks about some amazing stories of when they were fleeing and they had the horses and.
Oh yeah, well, his father was a miller. He was with my dad in the mill, and he learned to become the what do you call it? The trade. He learned to become a miller, and he was in the office and was working, and he had no idea how to feed horses, how to do anything. So when they fled with two of the horses and the wagon, he was not too well aware of what the horses needed, or maybe they didn't find any food on the way, or whatever happened. The horses just fell over and died. And my cousin said, he's 2 years younger than I am, and he said, I never forget my father for that. That
he never forgave him.
He never forgave him that he let the horses die, and so they had the baby at the time. And the cousin, his sister and him and his mother. And so they somehow went through from the Yugoslavia all the way up to what is Poland. And then they were directed back into Czechoslovakia, and from Czechoslovakia into Bavaria. That's where I found them in, 1957.
And you just found that story out about a year ago,
Yeah, he told me. So, because a lot of times we did not talk about some of the stories. Or friends of mine, they said, oh, your mother died in that camp, or your brother or sister died in that camp. Well, I didn't know. Well, we didn't talk about it. So.
That's why, I remember growing up and being very young. I couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, and you would say to me, of course you're going to learn about what happened, how the Jews have been persecuted for so many years, and that of course it was an atrocity what happened, but you will probably not read in the history books about what happened to the Germans that had lived in all of these other countries, and that 20 million people were basically expelled. There was ethnic cleansing going on, and that we would not read about that. And the thing about
if I can say that, if you hear about the Holocaust and what happened to the Jews, it just does not come near to what happened to any other people, because this was so horrendous to take millions of people and put them in camps and really kill them just because they were Jewish or because they were of a different religion or something. It just is incredible. Now, what happened to us Germans, Hitler and the Germans started the war, so there is an explanation, a reason perhaps, but there is no reason and no excuse for doing it to the little people and the people that are always in the way of wars and have to pay the price. So that I could say.
I think being a German, and I was born in '61, so of course I wasn't even around when that was happening, but there's so much pride in being a German with, history and psychology and doctors and just, some of the inventions of the Germans, but it's almost like it's stamped in our DNA that there's also this great shame of being a German.
Yeah.
Because
well,
of what
we have
Hitler
to carry
did.
that for the rest of history. Yes,
Right.
it is part of history, and there were too many enemies. Germany caused itself too many enemies, who then were able to jump on them after they lost the war. So it was understandable. It is understandable. To blame me for something I didn't do, or to blame my children, and I'm not kidding. My children were called Nazis, and we lived in Southgate at the time, and my boys would play with other kids, and they would be called Nazis and dirty Germans. I mean, they came and said, "Mom, what was wrong?" Yeah, that was in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
So yes, it was pretty rough, but that those are small things to carry when you look at the whole picture. And,
So tell me something about when you had a chance, because you had men court you that were other than Dad. You had a man that wanted to take you to Australia. How did that happen? Did you find each other through letters, through pictures?
No, through letters. Well, he was a young man who emigrated to Australia, and he advertised. Mostly young men went to Australia because they were scared. It's so far, and the problems were you had to go into a camp. In America, it wasn't. You didn't have to go into a camp if you went to America, and so you had to go to Australia. You had to go, and I said, "Nah, that's too far for me." So anyway, I got in contact with him through our German newspaper. But then when time came, I didn't go to Australia. Apparently, as you can see, I came to California.
You said something that I thought was really powerful. You felt like he had you came from nothing.
Yes, well, okay, he was already in Australia. That is actually interesting. And I hope nobody follows that recipe. I felt we were not poor at home, and when you are stripped of everything, of your decency, of your humanity and everything, you feel like you're nothing. And then he was there, and he said he was a home builder. He had a good job in Australia. He started building a house, and I said to myself, I'm not going to Australia. I already has a house there, and I'm coming there like a gypsy. I come there like
a refugee.
Well, like a refugee, which was the truth. So that was one of the most important reasons I remember that I didn't go to Australia. He would have been perfect.
You felt like you weren't worthy. And
yeah,
he was he was really,
he was a good
man.
I met him later. I met him twice in my life. And we call each other occasionally.
He still contacts you after all of these years.
Yeah,
he never
really
forgot
nice guy. Made it very rich. And I did marry my husband, who was as poor as I was, because he was also a refugee, and he stayed in Germany longer.
Here's some water if you want some water.
So anyway, we were poor in America. So it was not a very good idea for me to marry somebody that was as poor as I was.
I think that often women...
yeah, really do.
It's okay. I think that's something that we do as people. We make ourselves smaller and less than. We don't think we're worthy of someone that maybe has more.
I didn't realize at the time
what it was.
But my main reason was that he has brought it himself farther ahead than I was in Germany, and then I would go to Australia to marry him. It was like I was selling myself, or I really don't know. Maybe it was pride. Could be a matter of pride. I'm not sure what it exactly.
On the one side, pride, and on the other side, shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was one experience.
And Dad followed you how many months later?
Actually, my husband followed me to America. Now that we go into smaller details, I knew my husband. I think I mentioned wrongly earlier that I met him here. I met my husband in Germany a year before I came to America. And then we kind of fell in love, of course. And he said he would follow me. He would go to America too. He would come to California. He lived in Munich at the time. I lived in Regensburg, which is about 2 hours by train. And so when I came, my brother and I, he applied for citizenship. I mean, not for citizenship, for
approval to come in?
Approval to come to America. And he came 6 months later. We got married here 3 weeks later. We didn't know each other not too well because we didn't live together in Germany either. But we lived together for 33 years. And he died suddenly at the age of 59. He was a good husband. He was working hard. He was working really too hard. For him, it was harder to acquire the language, everything, because he had a wonderful job in Germany. He was dumb enough to follow a girl, to follow a woman.
And you were dumb enough to say yes.
No, it was really strange. He followed me, and then he always blamed me. He said everything went wrong in America was my fault. So it was not easy in the beginning.
Well, I think I look at you as a woman that was as old world as your life was. You were really a woman of more of a modern day woman in that this is where the clash was between you and Dad.
My husband was more European. He was more a German guy.
He wanted me to get up and clear the table and do the dishes, and you would say, I have 2 capable sons, which are both incredible husbands and fathers, I might say, and your daughter is the one who decided to stay single.
Yeah, I was more for equality. Yeah, if what a girl could do, a man could do around the house too. There were sometimes quarrels between us around that stuff like that.
Are you comfortable? Just, I think, for the sake of history, Dad was tough. Even though you had, these 3 kids, it was not a walk in the park. Dad was. We really grew up in a house of domestic violence, and that wasn't. It's okay. We can cut it out.
You shouldn't go there.
Well, the thing is, Mom, when you don't go there and tell what the story is, it never gets better.
Well, it does get better. I wouldn't say that because we did not talk about it. So my sons are totally different than their father.
I know.
My husband could not. Yeah, it was hard for him to start. When he had a good life in Germany already, and he came here, he stayed with me all the years. He was always working. He worked till the day he died.
I think he just didn't have the skill set. The frustration became...
Yeah, for me, learning English, because I had already 2 languages back home. But he had German only, and then when he came here, it was hard for him to learn English and... shed his heavy accent. It was harder for him to get ahead in America than it was for me. Right. And that was always rubbing, was not always...
And he was my father, he did the best he could. I look back and I think of the 2 of you that, came to this country and worked so hard.
Well, we're doing good, and I'm now at, let's say, towards the end of our lives, and mine especially. I'm 20 years ahead of him now. I'm glad I'm here. I have the best climate in California. That's one of the main things when you have arthritis, when you have different ailments when you get older. living in Germany, if I had stayed in Germany, I probably would be crippled by now. Because it's cold in the winter, it rains a lot. And here, I know we made the right choice to come here. So I have absolutely
You have no regrets in
no
your life.
regrets coming here at all, no.
How wonderful is it to say that?
Yeah.
There's so many people that cannot say that.
Yeah, so.
I just want to say, Mom, you're my best friend. You've been such a great mother to all of us. And if there was anything we ever wanted that you had, even if it was the most meager thing, you would give it to us. And I just really feel blessed.
Now I have, as you can see, my daughter. She is really the best that a mother could wish for a daughter. I let her go early, and she came back. She's here, and that much I am very, very grateful.
Me too, Mom.
And I have 2 wonderful sons, Michael and Richard. They are really great sons, and I have 4 wonderful grandchildren. There is Stephanie and Stephen and Honey and Sarah. 2 blondes, 2 browns,
2 brunettes, and all your siblings are still alive.
Yes, they are. Thank God. I'm
Heinrich
78.
here, and
my brother, one is 76, one is 75, and my sister is about 65. She was kind of she came kind of late to my parents, and she is still alive, and that is the thing. And I feel more than ever that I will be the first one to go, which will be okay. I live twice my mother's age plus 10 years, and exactly twice my father's age, what he was able to live. So I tell my children, just think, I was 14 and 15 and a half when I lost my parents, and my siblings were even younger. So be grateful what you have. You have me for a long time. So when time comes to go, then it'll be okay.
Tell me about your love for dancing.
Well, I wouldn't go dancing now anymore. I love everybody who goes dancing. My 2 brothers still go dancing with their wives. And I always love to dance. Yeah, I hope, even if I'm gone, I hope my kids go dancing. Even if my brothers live long enough and can go, they should go too.
We listen to German music all of the time.
Yeah,
still.
a lot of times,
she has the German music on every weekend. And we grew up really with a whole array of music. I mean, I remember listening to Beethoven and Mozart, a lot more Beethoven growing up, polkas and waltzes, and any time the music is going, my mother's shoulders are going and she's smiling, and that's how I'll always think of you is through music. You gave all of us a love for music, all of us.
Yeah.
And you really are the family historian in our family.
Well, I used to be better, but I lost about 3 months ago. I lost half of not my half, but about 80% of my left eye, and I had a stroke. So my head is not quite as it should be or as it used to be. But then nothing ever stays the same either. So, so I think this was a very probably. I tried not to have this discussion and not to have this done. Maybe it was good, and I hope it is good for all of you kids.
Thank you,
because Mom, at least I have left you a little bit back. So even though, like I say, I was scared of it, and I thought, oh, please don't have me do this.
Yeah, she really did not want me to have this. She was adamant about it, and here I meet this wonderful person, Michael Smith, and he says yes, he would be delighted, and thank you for hosting us here today and doing this video production. I did feel like it was important for us.
Yeah, I think it is. So I'm glad.
Thank you so much, Mom.
Okay, you're
welcome.
welcome.
I love you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.